Hey there, Max here, writing advice videos. You know what I do, let's just dive right in. So, recently I've gotten a few questions that I meant to answer, but I immediately didn't have a reply to. And this is this week, basically, because I'm also doing one for Sunday. And these questions have been lingering in the back of my mind, and I wanted to sit down and talk about them. And one of these questions is regarding the idea of what can we do when our characters, especially our protagonists, the heroes of our story, do something that can be seen as inherently bad. What happens when our characters do cruel, selfish things? And, of course, before I go on anywhere, I should really remind you that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as the ramblings of a silly person who looks a little bit, or rather precisely, like this. Okay, that's out of the way, let's dive in. What happens when good characters do bad things? That's a very reductive way of saying it. But what happens when our protagonists do really, really bad things? The question that I got from a dear friend, and it struck with me because it's this conversation that happens every time, especially when an LGBT character does something bad. Because there's this kind of unspoken rule, this unspoken expectation that characters who happen to be minorities, whether it is people of color or LGBT plus, should be paragons of virtue when it comes to fiction. And I could not, I mean, okay, I can definitely think of more poisonous ideas than that, but that one is up there. And it's a weird sentiment that I face sometimes. Because for me, and the way that I've always tackled fiction, is that your characters are your characters are your characters. That sentiment made a lot more sense in my head. But what I mean is that when I sit down to write, I just write the characters as they come to me. I write them as they truly come to me. And I find that writing is always hardest when I'm pulling away from that. When I am full of hesitation and doubt and fear. What are people gonna think if they read this? What are people gonna say if this character does this? Are they not supposed to be the good guy? The hero? How can they call themselves such things when they do villainous acts? Writing became a lot easier when I kind of ignored those things. I mean, come on, let's be real. Yes, the problem would be solved if all the parties involved sat down and talked about their feelings. Yeah, but people don't do that, though. People don't do that. Let's be real here. And you know that we're more likely to run away from the problem. You have been there. You have been there when you're walking down the street and you see a person you don't like, or a person who hurt you, or who said something mean to you, and you're more willing to cross the street, walk on the other sidewalk, to just not see them and interact with them, than to walk down and tell them how they hurt you. We all have been there. That's a very relatable feeling. So, people don't just sit down and talk about their problems. It doesn't happen. And I think it's very easy to make comments like that, to say, oh, why didn't the character just do this? Why didn't the character just do that? Why did they do something so cruel in a moment of passion? When we are outside of the sphere of the moment, when we have full context for what all the parties meant to say. And I feel like, once again, and the worst part is that this gets put on the expectations that minority characters should all be paragons of virtue, because otherwise they're making that minority group look bad, which I've never thought about, which every time that idea comes up, it just baffles me, because people are people, and people are flawed, and sometimes people do bad things, and sometimes people do things without thinking, sometimes people say bad things without thinking, and that is the part of the nature of being human. No one's perfect. We can try to get there. But we cannot simply just say this character is good, has always been good, will always be good. I feel like that's the most immediate way to disappoint yourself. And also, a way to make the writing incredibly unfun. And the story unfun. The example that was sent to me was about a writer whose main character, who happened to be LGBT, faced their antagonist for the final time, and instead of offering them mercy, they just outright murdered them. And they explained to me the situation, they explained to me what went on in the character's head, and in that moment of hesitation, they just did it. And while it's true that murder is bad. I don't think anyone's here is going to argue that murder is bad. But understanding what happened in the scene, understanding what the character did by showing their point of view. It's almost as though when you show someone's perspective, you can learn to understand them. Not agree with them, never agree with them, but at least understand where they came from. And I told them that if that's what the character did in the story, that's what the character did. I talked about this last week. But if you fight the flow of the story, one, you're not gonna get that story finished, and second, the story will fight you back until either A, you give up, or you give in. The story always wins. And your character is your character is your character. You have to tell their story as it comes to you. The one thing that always comes to me, the one complaint that I can already see someone in the comments right now, but Max, you don't want to make it gratuitous. I know. We don't make it gratuitous. What does a gratuitous mean? With no purpose, seemingly out of nowhere, for free. As I said in the example, the reason why that character, instead of showing mercy to the antagonist who caused so many bad things to them, and instead just kill them outright at the very climax of the story, was because of everything that happened before. It wasn't just the entire time the character never thought about murder and suddenly at the final hour they just go for it. It's set up. It's introduced. It's not coming out of nowhere. It's not seemingly without reason. It's not for free. It's not gratuitous. I think anyone self-conscious enough to wonder about this is self-conscious enough to not do it gratuitously. I know that I've strayed a little bit away from the point, so let's back up. What happens when our characters do bad things? Especially our protagonists, the people who are the point of view, the people who some people may call them the good guys, or the heroes. I don't like saying that, because it colors the characters. It tells you that it kind of puts them on a pedestal, and it puts them on the high moral ground, and I don't like doing that. Mostly because characters are people, and sometimes people make bad choices. Sometimes people do things without thinking twice. Sometimes people say bad things that you can't take back. And that happens, though. That's part of being human and being a person, and I think that's the difference, the key difference between writing characters that are fully realized people and just kind of puppets that we kind of put words in the mouth of. What I want you to get out of this, especially you, the erratically friend who sent me that question, and this untimely reply, is that in the act of writing, you should not question what is happening. You should just put it on the page. And I know that it can be incredibly daunting, especially if it's the first time you're writing, and especially if you're worried about what people may think. But let me remind you again. What you're writing is the first draft, the first version of the story. It is best to capture as it comes to you naturally. Capture those characters' thoughts and words and actions, especially their actions. Capture them all onto the page. So that later when the revision comes, you can analyze them and make them ring true. Like, for instance, the example that the writerly friend sent of this character who, at the very peak of the story, at the climax of the story, instead of showing mercy to the antagonist, they just outright murder them. The things that you would do in revision is to establish that earlier, to establish that doubt, that sensation, or even just flat out ask the question, what are you gonna do when you get your hands on that person? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? That's part of revision. And all these things, I know that in the act of writing it may seem to you, oh, here you go, I just ruined this character. Or they just did something so completely unreasonable that I don't know how I'm gonna fix it. You will fix it. You'll find a way. Revision is the place to make all of this make sense. That's the point in which, let's talk about themes. Revision is the point in which we make all these elements ring true. We go back to the beginning and we establish things earlier. We establish the doubt in the main character. We establish that wonderful little voice in the back of their head, filling them with doubt. Are you gonna be strong enough to not pull the trigger when you have that awful person in your hands? Are you gonna let them get away again? What choice would you make? What choice is that character gonna make? Ultimately, our characters are people. And if you want them to behave like people, you gotta treat them like people. You don't put words in their mouth. You don't pull their limbs with strings like they're puppets. You let them happen as they happen in the story. And in revision, we make sure it all rings true and it all makes sense. Because as I said, bad things make for good fiction. A story in which everything is uneventful and everything happens according to plan and no one is hurt and everyone is happy at the end probably is not a very exciting story. Adversity and strife are at the very center of storytelling. People struggle. People make bad choices. People trip along the way to success, and that's fine. That's the way life is, and we emulate it in writing. Okay, so to my dear viewer out there, concerned, worried, keep writing. Keep writing. There's nothing wrong with a character who makes a bad choice. Even though someone might argue that killing the antagonist at the end, who was clearly a very bad person, killing them at the end may not actually be the bad choice. But here we go again, now talking about morality. I think it's good to pose questions and to show how people tackle different answers, but not particularly to put characters on moral high grounds, or moral low grounds. That's why I don't call my characters heroes or villains. They're just protagonists and antagonists. The person at the center of the story, and those who stand in their way. Maybe because they dislike one another, but more often than not because their goals are inherently incompatible. And now, I hope that this video helped, and I hope that if anything I gave you another point of view. For now, I would love to hear what you have to say regarding this particular subject in the comments down below. Did I miss something? It's entirely likely I missed something very obvious, so please let me know. I would be more than glad to expand more on my thoughts in the comments down below. And I also take your questions. You know what to do, you've been here before. Additional to that, I want to let you know I have a Twitter account where I post about what I've been doing, my writing. I post writing inspirational stuffs, writing jokes. You know me, it's what I do. And also, as always, my Patreon, where you can support me and help me make more of this. If you pledge $1, $1 a month, you can watch these videos a week in advance. You can pause right now, because you're caught up with this video. You have nothing else to watch for the rest of the week. Except you do. You can watch next week's videos over at my Patreon. Patreon.com/mkaren. You can also get a shout out like the following people. Thank you so much for helping me do what I do. I really appreciate it. You're giving me that extra confidence and that extra support so that I can dedicate more time to these videos and make them look a little bit better. We have a different camera now, and I think that's pretty good. And now, as we walk, prance, waltz, as we waltz into the end slate, I want to let you know that there should be a playlist on the screen right now with over 300 writing advice videos. My god, that's a lot. Also, a button to subscribe, a link to my Patreon, and a button to go to my other channel with my best friend Kitty, where we play games, we watch anime, and we're very, 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 very silly people. Thank you for hanging along. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. And let's hear it one more time. It's okay, because bad things make for good fiction.